Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in. And this is Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And with me is Christiana Davidson. She's a licensed therapist, and she resides now in the Caribbean. And she's been on the team for many, many years. And I welcome you, Christiana. Thank you for staying up and being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Of course. And I really do appreciate the fact that we can chat it up and reveal some interesting information and mind map it. And tonight's subject is sex and the aging narcissist. I thought that was a great topic. That was Christiana's idea. And so I hope that you, the audience, can relate and then eventually call in. So Christiana, what are you thinking in terms of sex and the aging narcissist? What do you think happens as a narcissist ages?
Well, if we think about it, broadly speaking, if we think about narcissistic personalities, we can separate them into two different main types. There's the somatic and the cerebral types. And each of those types is dominant in one of those areas. So you'll have a somatic narcissist who also has cerebral tendencies, but is more dominant in the somatic side, and the same with the cerebral. Now, it's important to know that because as we know...
I just wanted you to define it, because that's not a term that I even use, somatic and cerebral. So I want to know, the audience wants to know, what is somatic versus cerebral?
What is cerebral? So the somatic narcissist gets their supply, because that's what narcissism is about. The whole thing is about supply. They get their supply through the soma, the body. Okay. The cerebral type, the more dominantly cerebral type, gets their supply through the intellect.
Understood. Okay. And so I'm imagining they experience aging differently.
Exactly. Now, for any of us, Dr. Judy, aging is not always an easy process. But you can imagine for the narcissist, aging is going to be extremely difficult because they are slowly losing their ability to get supply, either somatically or cerebrally. Now, somatically, as the narcissist ages, their ability to seduce becomes less and less. They're less able to use their body to attract supply, snare supply. Yes. And the cerebral, as they age, is often less able to, sometimes they might start losing their memory, or their ability to hear and see, or that sort of thing starts to deteriorate. And that's very scary for the cerebral, because they're not able to come across as this super, fount of knowledge who's got everything, all the wisdom, and they come across sometimes as less able to do that.
When you were saying cerebral, and I'm not particularly thinking that he was a narcissist, but I'm thinking about Marilyn Monroe and one of her husbands, Arthur Miller, who was so intellectual. And so he was able to capture the attention of this young, beautiful woman because of his brain power. And so You're right. So once you start losing your memory and you can't read as well, and you can't hear as well, then your snaring supply, right, starts to dwindle. And so you're not able to be as affirmed by other people as you were when you were young. Yeah.
And that's terrifying, because that's the false self. If we think about it, this is what the whole identity has been formed on, is the main maintenance of this false self, and it's either somatically or cerebrally. And when that is under threat as you age, it's like a sort of, I would say, both a panic and a deep frustration. Anger starts to set in. And this may become quite apparent to people, actually. You know, if you have an aging narcissistic parent or an aging narcissistic partner, you may be more aware of their tendency to become more frustrated.
Yes.
You know, if you're, say, you're younger than them, they may begin to feel that they can no longer compete with you, and there can be sort of a ramping up of making you feel guilty about that.
Now that brings to mind a lot of the work that you do, Christiana, because you work with mothers and daughters. And so this would be an issue when the mother starts to age and the daughter starts to bloom and the envy kicks in, and the mother is now no longer the center of attention, and the daughter is getting
Yes.
breaths and
yes, because you know,
it's not a happy time for the mother.
No, and if you think about it, narcissistic mothers, their aim generally is to control the daughter's blossoming sexuality as a young child, to make sure that it's under her control, and usually it's to stamp it down or to neglect it or to reject it. And so as the mother begins to fade in her age and in her looks and in her attractiveness, she then will be, you know, take it personally if the daughter begins to get more attention than her, begins to, you know, come into her own self in front of her. It's almost, she will take it as a personal attack, that you, because she's aging, you're taking the opportunity now to stamp on her. And of course, it's not that at all. It's just a natural part of the process of life. And, you know, the mother had her time in the sun, and now it's the daughter's time. This is the natural process of life.
But the narcissist doesn't want to give up the #1 position. So it's always the time in the sun.
Yes.
It doesn't,
of course.
the sun shouldn't go down, correct? And they are that's the universe, so it doesn't go down.
And they'll be down, you know, down the surgery, having, you know, lots of Botox and, you know, facelifts, and, you know, not that any of that is necessarily bad, but when you have a narcissistic type that's resorting to that, they're doing it because their life depends on it. You know, they've got to be able to kind of keep up in the game and keep that attention somehow. It's, you know, they've got to maintain that youthful seductiveness or ability, because else they have no worth.
So there's an incongruency between their stage of life and their looks. So I think they may tend to go too far. We all love to look young and beautiful, and Botox and fillers and facelifts and dermabrasion, what have you, men and women alike. It's just that in the case of narcissists, you know, like everything has a certain bell curve to it. And when people are so injured by that wrinkle or by that sag or by that whatever facial new drop in the jaws, whatever's going on, it actually is such an injury. Instead of looking in the mirror and thinking, I've earned my wrinkles, I'm beautiful for my age, I'm healthy.
It always reminds me of, you know, Snow White. And the queen looking in the mirror, and, you know, she's a lot older, and she's going, you know, who's expecting to be the fairest of them all, and then being so annoyed that she's willing to kill the younger one, because, you know, to maintain her position.
Right, which brings us to the murderous, envious rage of the narcissist who's aging, and this frustration with the body, and the frustration with the people around them who may be younger and coming into their own, as you said. and what those feelings are like within the narcissist. And now we've got this, we talked about the false self. When I think about the false self, I think about this house of cards. So there's nothing underneath.
Yes.
Just that there's a building up, a layering over. And I think the aging process, or the loss of sexuality, the loss of beauty, the loss of sexuality, is pretty much saying to the narcissist, you're in trouble. The house of cards is falling, and you can't prop it up for much too long, because it's the cracks are obvious, and there's nothing underneath there that is going to catch you, because there's no sense of self. There's no true sense of self, of a real worthiness, a sense of being lovable and enough. And so all of this puffing and puffing and layering on the beauty or the Viagra or the sexuality,
yes,
whatever it is, right?
In the gym, you know, trying to keep up a buff exterior, even things like, you know, marrying somebody very much younger, or you know, using your money as a replacement to seduce people in and get the attention that you need. There's lots of different sort of ways that false self is desperately clung on to as the narcissist ages.
I was reading some time ago that men who marry younger get invigorated. Okay, so I don't know, maybe they have inspiration from their young hot girlfriend or wife to
probably would make sense, wouldn't it?
Longer. I don't know if the women get invigorated when they pair up with the younger man. I don't remember the results of that study, but it's just the image, you see, because people marry people. They should marry people because they are in alignment with them, and that they have good character, and that they make them feel comfortable and welcome and loved. However, in the case of a narcissistic pairing, the person wants that partner to be eye candy and arm candy, and so extension. Not necessarily to make them feel good, but to look good. So they may give up the love and the nurturance in favor of the person who is going to present well and make them look younger and more alluring. So they're looking more at the package. And so as their package literally is dwindling, then the package that they're choosing beside them to be by their side is going to somehow enhance them. So there's not a sense of synergy. There's just a sense of what's going to make me look good, what's going to make me feel good, what kind of plastic surgery is going to help puff up my false self, and on and on and on. And so I think, audience, you're beginning to get the impression that aging is not very favorable for a narcissist. I want to get a little bit into how narcissism is formed. I am currently filming my video titled Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, which I'm very excited about. And we're going to do a lot of work with that, and webinars included. And so I want to sort of let the audience know that that's coming up next. And so one of the ways narcissists are formed is by parents who spoil their children and give them a sense of entitlement without ownership. So when you get all the compliments and all the presents and all the cheers and all the acknowledgement, and you haven't earned any of it, it's a problem, because there's the false self, right? Mommy says I'm great, daddy says I'm great, I'm being treated wonderfully, but what did I do? You know, what did I do? So the other end of it is that they're treated that way, except when they don't please their parents. So On the one hand, they're spoiled. On the other hand, they're demeaned and devalued and destroyed, very criticized when they don't meet their parents' standards or when they don't fulfill on their parents' wishes. For example, if the parents want their son or daughter to become a doctor or a lawyer, and the son or daughter chooses differently, then the narcissistic supply may be withdrawn. Or if they choose a spouse that the parents don't approve of, or even at an earlier age, if they're not taking the kinds of classes that mommy wants them to or daddy wants them to, then they may be punished for that because they're not fulfilling mommy's and daddy's dreams. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they're praised, but then again, they're criticized and punished when they don't fulfill. So this creates a lot of confusion for the individual. And you can see that the sense of self is not truly formed because it takes work, and it takes the support of parents, and it takes parents who put their own feelings not before the child, okay, after the child. So the child has to come first. So nothing's really forming inside.
Exactly. Yes, there's you're right, you know, that is where this all begins. You know, it begins at the beginning of their lives and then endures right to the end. This need for that supply, that the attention, the praise that was there at the beginning. It's that constant trying to maintain that in order to feel like you are somebody, or that you have an identity.
And then the other way narcissism is formed is when there's extreme emotional neglect. So let's say they are rewarded with objects, but then the emotions are not present and the parents lack empathy. So apathetic parents, emotionally unavailable parents, and then they'll say something to the child like, you know, blow off, here's $100, get out of here, okay? So the message is that objects are more valuable than human connection. And that's another way narcissism is formed, because now the person gets the message that objectification is the way to go. And let's not connect, and let's not form these intimate relationships because it's going to hurt. And so now you have an aging narcissist, right, who hasn't formed any real intimate connections and has only formed these superficial relationships based on the objectification of the other person and based on what they can do. So they become human doings. And then when they are less able to do or less able to present in a sexy way, in a handsome or beautiful way, well, the shell begins.
Well, exactly. And, you know, narcissists are autoerotic, so they are in love with themselves. And so anybody else is an object of allowing them to be in love with themselves. So in any relationship, you know, the other person, by you know, I don't know, you know, having an intimate relationship or a sexual relationship, really the narcissist is loving themselves by doing that.
Beautiful point. And so in my book, Be the Cause: Healing Human Disconnect, which everyone is welcome to a copy of, you can download it for free off my website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com, or you can pick it up from Amazon.com as well. And so in my book, I talk about sexuality and the objectification of sexuality, and the idea that the men or the women who are the partners of the narcissist feel like they are blow-up dolls. So having sex with a narcissist is a very lonely experience because they don't really connect. They
don't see you, they see themselves.
They're not into you. They're in you, but they're not into you.
Yes, you're right. They're into themselves, yeah.
So they may be looking at your eyes, but really they're looking at the reflection of
Yes.
themselves in your eyes, or they may be touching your body parts, but they're not really connected with the sensuality and the feedback loop of how it makes you feel. Because remember, they've had no mirroring, they've had no attunement, and this is where all that starts. And when you're a sexual creature, you have to pay attention to how it makes your partner feel as well. Or you're going to have a partner that's pretty lonely and feeling pretty used, right? And actually, unfortunately, creating a toxic bond with that person, because maybe that person is into you and can feel and so forth. It's just that the bonding does not go both ways. And it's very painful then to withdraw from that individual. So if there are any questions or calls, I think it might be a nice time for people to ask away and share about your life. And I'd love to hear from you. And I know Christiana would love to hear from you too. And we do offer consultations, full consultations, or 15-minute free ones, and you're welcome to avail yourself of a consultation. And most of you know, if you've been watching for a while, that we do mind map therapy. So let me put the mind map up so you can see what I mean and break it down. And let's start with panel 1, wounds of childhood. So in the case of narcissism, there's an apathetic mother or father, which shadows over the child's ability to really develop the sense of self and to feel and to have the experience of connecting. So it's a very disconnecting experience. And again, the smothering, the spoiling, and the criticism, along with the emotional unavailability, makes the person put a wall around themselves. So that's what you're seeing. The narcissist has a wall, the narcissistic defense. And as they age, the wall begins to, at least the outer shell begins to crack, and then they panic and start shoring up with surgery or paying more money to get more people interested in them, or faking it till they make it, or get more Viagra and Cialis, is that what it's called? Or the medication that will help with the erectile dysfunction and so on.
Okay.
So you see, it's also very, very sad, because that panel 1 wound of the separation between the mother and the infant, the father and the infant, arrests the person in development, as I was saying. And now the person is an older person in a little immature body. Okay, so I should say the body's mature, okay, and aging, but the person in there is quite stunted in development. So they have no ability to really have tolerance or not getting what they want. Their bandwidth is quite small. They rage if they don't get their way. I think of Veruca and Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, where she's the daughter of the rich guy who owns the factory, and she wins the ticket because her father bought like gazillion chocolate bars, and then the winning ticket, it was in one of those, and then she's still stomping her feet. It's never enough, because right? Because there's no real nurturance. And then there's that hole in the soul. What's that? Oh, thank you. Oh,
yeah, that was great.
Right. And she stomps away. I want a pony. And you could see that the narcissism at that early stage is forming. Now imagine little Veruca at age 65, 75, 85. She's not too cute anymore. She's stomping away, and people are moving away because it's ugly. Maybe it's cute for a minute at age, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, but not so cute later in your years. So if there's anybody who wants to call in and ask questions, please do. And if you have any questions, chat room, please ask. Yes.
There's an aspect of this that we haven't touched on, Dr. Judy, while we open it up to callers now. The focus is the body, or the focus is the intellect in terms of getting supply. Now, when you have the somatic type, what often can happen is the focus remains on the body, but in a different context. So instead of getting supply from being attractive and, flirting and seducing through the body, they still maintain attention on their body, but this time they switch it to bodily ailments. So there can become
good point.
a focus then on being the victim of all these ailments, and very, very sort of consistent talking about the issues they're having and needing somebody to come in and step in and care for them, and the ramping up almost of the guilt aspect of the relationship, because that will also maintain you then in the relationship, because they are terrified that now they aren't able to go off and really get new supply.
Right.
So they yeah.
No, I think your point is well taken. The caregivers become their supply. Of course, they have to pay for it.
Yes.
But imagine working for a narcissist. Get me this, get me that, jump this way, jump that way. And then they tend to be on the cheaper side. And so at the end of that game, here's your quarter. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
and nothing's good enough.
Nothing's good enough. So you're right. They substitute the human touch for doctors,
Ailments.
caregivers, and through their ailments, they have a good reason to be examined and to constantly complain and to suck the air out of the room because they're not feeling well.
Yes.
And that's why narcissists oftentimes die alone. It's very sad to see. I remember years ago, I worked at an old age home, and I recall that there were so many people that weren't being visited. And, you wonder why. You wonder why these people are there. Is it that the children don't really feel the urge to take care of them? Is it that they didn't take care of their children when the kids were younger, so they never really developed a proper bond? Are the children now resentful of their parents? So remember, when you put energy, loving, kind, attentive energy into a system, you get back interest, literally. Your kids will be interested in helping you. And if you don't put that in, if you don't invest your time and love, not just your money or your praise, if you don't really invest your heart into your family, your children, you're not going to get a lot back. And that shows up at the end of life. And so
And for a narcissist, just listening to what you're saying there, just thinking, there must be nothing more terrifying than thinking of dying alone.
Yes. Correct.
Without supply. I mean, right. That's a death in itself, isn't it?
Yes, without their loving family around them, or a significant other, spouse by their side. It's very, very scary. But then again, they didn't earn unconditional love, so they can't expect unconditional love. And unless they're paying their hot new husband or wife a lot of money in the form of big house, big car, lots of jewelry, great entertainment. So as long as the money chain is there, maybe they will do for them. They will do for them.
Yes, they'll stop at nothing. In fact, sometimes I think what can happen is that they'll settle for less and less quality supply.
I've seen this happen. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of a situation.
Anyone, like the milkman or the.
They go for lower hanging fruit. And the reason they do that is because lower hanging fruit is more controllable. They can also tolerate more. I'm thinking of a situation where, on TikTok or these videos, feeds, they always have wait for it. Okay, so this is a case of a narcissistic man who picks a very vulnerable and somewhat naive woman, and he's cheating on her and, of course, visiting old girlfriends and so on, and she's tolerating it or closing her eyes to it, or maybe doesn't even know about it, and they're aging and aging and aging, and he's still on the fence. He hasn't asked the person to marry her, and then finally he or maybe she forces the issue, and then the engagement ring. And guess what the engagement is? The ring looks like kind of a plasticky cubic zirconium ring. So, like wait for it. Let's wait 15, 20 years for the narcissist to finally decide. Now, why is this person finally deciding? And what's the significance of the ring? Okay. So they're deciding because now their options are a little bit low. They don't look as great as they used to. There's the woman beside the man in this case who's been with him for many, many years. And so he's older now, his back hurts, and maybe he's not functioning as well, and maybe the money is dwindling, and at least he knows that his lower hanging fruit is going to look the other way if he does get lucky enough to score with another person, or if he doesn't have enough money, or if his teeth are falling out. That's all okay, because she's going to tolerate. And then what do you think this cubic zirconium is signifying?
I don't know.
So if a man after 15, 20 years gives a woman and can afford an actual ring, what do you think it's signifying?
If he can afford a ring.
Can afford a ring, but he gives her a cubic zirconium one.
Oh, well, it's a slap in the face, isn't it? It's showing complete disrespect and.
Yeah, total. And then the woman's saying, "Oh, I'm so happy he finally
committed."
So I'm saying this because many people are so naive to think that the very little, the breadcrumbs they get from the narcissist is just so precious. Okay, so why is that happening? Because we've been groomed that way. We've been groomed to really receive so little, so we expect so little. Some of us have been groomed that way.
Yes, exactly. And it is a dangerous time, when say a narcissistic parent is aging, because they are so desperate for supply. And of course, when they're less able to get it out there, they're going to immediately circle back round to their primary supply source. And that is usually the child. And there will be a real attempt now to draw this child back into some kind of carer role, because that's what the parent has been, sort of trying to form all along in some ways.
So you're reminding me of a certain dynamics where the daughter or the son is like the little husband or the little wife, and the aging narcissist can't get supply, and so they have no sexual adventures because they're all alone, and they pull in their younger daughter or their younger son to take care of them and guilt them to death, so that they will, because they don't want to lose the parental love, or they don't want to lose the inheritance, or they're just good little children.
And guilt.
Right.
So that and sometimes the child themselves may not have had their own relationship or their own marriage, and will have spent their whole lives almost as the surrogate spouse, you know, and even at the end of the days is still in the substitute husband role or substitute wife role. It's like they've never been able to be set free from it.
I remember learning about a case of a mother and a son, enmeshed relationship, where the mother had a horrible marriage and her only real friend was her son, and he was her little husband. And whenever he mentioned getting married, she would go somatic. She'd have heart palpitations and high anxiety, and she'd end up in the hospital from a panic attack. So this man, poor guy, was toxically tied to his mother. He was underdeveloped emotionally. The only real sexuality he had was seeking sex from prostitutes, because that was even okay with the mother, because the prostitutes were not going to be his wife. So that created less anxiety for her. So he came to seek treatment because he wanted to launch out of this toxic family tie to his mother. And so, you know, it looks like if I escape, my mother's going to die. What kind of deal is that?
Yes. And you know, you'll find with these narcissistic parents, they will have sort of dropped hints about this to the child throughout the course of their life. So saying things like, oh, you know, when I get old, you know, you will care for me, won't you? Or things like, you know, it's you and me together sort of thing, or
You and me, kid, right?
Yeah, or you will, you know, I'd hate to be alone, like some people are in care homes. You know, there'll be all these sort of hints that will have been planted, because the narcissistic parent is always looking out for their needs, not yours.
Absolutely. And sometimes these things turn into disasters where the parent might get sexually inappropriate with the son or daughter. The narcissistic parent doesn't care about ruining a child's sexuality as long as they're satisfied. So they may inappropriately touch or inappropriately comment, or as I mentioned, try to ruin the sexual future, the romantic future of the child. And again, you can see the childlike quality of this. You can see the arrested development. I want what I want and you can't have it, and I want to possess you because you're just like my little rag doll. I'm going to keep you around and I'm going to keep you close. And if I want to throw you away, it'll be because I'm sick of you. And if I want to bring you back in, it's because I'm bored. And there's no real true connection. And that's the sad part, is that's why narcissism is such a vampiring system, because the person who gets caught up with the narcissist is usually a people pleaser who wants to just give and give and give, and the narcissist just wants to take and take and take. And in the case of the aging narcissist, they want to take even more because they're so low on supply.
Exactly. You know, and sometimes because they are low in supply, they can temper their behavior a bit. They can appear to mellow a bit because of that lack of being able to get supply as they used to. However, it doesn't change the fact that they are a narcissist, and their aim is always to be the center of attention. And their modus operandi is that everybody needs to always have their focus on them. So they will employ, like we're saying, maybe other ways of ensuring that that focus is on them. It might be through, you know, sort of constant text messages, you know, ramping up the need for communication with you.
Yes.
All kind of drawing you back into worshiping into, yeah, it is.
Worshiping. And
and
now
centering your life around them.
take it to another stage, the dying narcissist, the aging narcissist who's now dying, and the person who is hoping that they can finally break through and get the apology that they've been dying for all their life, or have that person, mother, father, whoever, lover, husband, wife, finally own their own stuff. Okay. And that hardly ever comes. I can't think of too many cases where that is actually delivered to the person who needs it, because they want closure. And that's the dirtiness of the system gone wrong, is the narcissist never gives closure. They'll give a little molecule of love here,
right,
and a little carrot there. They'll future fake so that you get a little hope, a little cubic zirconium ring to pat you on the back and make
to remember them by.
Really, really you're very special. After 15, 20 years, this is what I really think of you. Okay. And so this is just goes on and on. And on the deathbed, you know how they say you die as you live, right? So the narcissist doesn't just suddenly open their heart and break down the barrier and flood with empathy. No, doesn't happen.
They maintain their control. And that can be the most painful part, that even on their deathbed, they do something to leave you feeling the way you've always felt, that sense of, I can't believe it. I can't believe they've still got that control over me. I can't believe they would be so cruel or so.
Right. They control you even after they're dead. They control you from the grave. So you don't know what your inheritance is going to be like. And oftentimes they have you do the song and dance for them, and then they end up leaving you with nothing. I've seen that happen.
Yes.
I've seen cases where the siblings are all over each other because they don't know which side the bread is buttered on, and so they're just clamoring to get on the good side of the narcissist, and they're all confused because they don't really know which is the good side and how to do it. So there's a lot of confusion and control up to the point and after death.
Yes. And yes, you're right. And just thinking there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that narcissists don't like to go to nursing homes, don't like to go to care homes, because they have this sense of superiority, whether they're somatic or they're cerebral. So the somatic is not going to like the fact that somebody else is telling them you need to take these pills, or you need to, I don't know, washing them or anything else. And the cerebral is not going to like it either, because who's somebody to tell them what to do, and all these idiots sitting around watching TV, and I'm this great intellect, and
I don't belong here. What am I doing? I'm too good for this place. Or then they'll use their illness to get more attention, and the button, the call button, it'll go a lot quicker
to maintain control that way. Yes.
Right. I need, get me this, get me that. Yeah.
Gosh.
So it's wearing on the person that's the caregiver or the significant.
I think we need to just acknowledge the job that caregivers, in these care homes are doing. I think some of them will be unsung heroes.
Very much so. And they have to care for themselves. So if you're a caregiver, if you're caring for your narcissist spouse or significant other, or mother, father, please take care, because they will drain you. And I talk a lot about the somatic effects on people who are the caregivers or people embroiled in narcissistic relationships. If you're getting headaches and backaches and stomach aches, and if your body is beginning to show real signs of wear and tear and breakdown, take care.
I remember a client I had once, and she was telling me about, her parents who, and not giving away any idea of who she is here, but that her parents, one of the parents was a narcissist and the other was the codependent, and the codependent was on their deathbed, and slowly getting worse and worse, and the narcissistic partner was so unempathic.
Yes.
It's just they're almost planning the celebratory gathering.
Yes.
Before the person's passed, and going out with friends, and gaining a lot of supply from, isn't it terrible? Oh yes, and I'm going through so much, and and really back at home, doing the bare minimum, almost kind of willing it to come sooner.
So again, the system gone wrong. If you have the wall around you, you're unable to connect. If you know that about yourself, it's most likely that most people who have that wall don't seek treatment until their husband, wife, or significant other complains. But now that we know so much about narcissism, I'm inviting people who know they have qualities of apathy and qualities of rage if they don't get quickly satisfied. If you know that you have these symptoms and qualities, know that you can still get help, and that the way we approach things is we go to the cause, and we have to go to the original pain that was inflicted that created the narcissistic injury that then created the narcissistic defense. So in treatment, in the treatment of narcissism, we have to go to the cause. And this, again, it's not a blaming and a shaming and a roasting of the dis-ease, as I like to call it. But for those of you who feel that this is getting in the way of your life and it's non-functional anymore, please call us, and we'd like to offer you a pathway out of this double dungeon of darkness, as I like to call it, because even though on the surface you might be feeling like, oh yeah, I've got all the goodies and I don't need you guys, and I'm better off not feeling, and I'm better off just huffing and puffing and inflating myself. I think there's always the little piece that says, wait a minute, I'm losing my wife, I'm losing my family, I'm losing my husband, I'm losing my job. So if you're in that place, know that there is hope. I don't think Freud was 100% correct. He said that these are the incurables. And I'd like to believe that if we get to the pain point, the inception of the pain point, then we can start unraveling eventually unraveling the psychopathology. And if you're a victim of narcissistic abuse, if you're married to a narcissist, we still have to look at your blueprint, because you were groomed to pair up with somebody who's a taker, and we want to dismantle that whole system gone wrong. So unless there's a quick call in, Christiana, do you want to add anything to any of what we're saying, or a quick question?
I was just thinking, I think sometimes there can be, towards the end of the life of the aging narcissist, there can be also a tendency to sort of throw in the towel. Having gone from a life of maybe being very glamorous and getting lots of attention for one's body and having a lot of focus on it, there can be the opposite, where they throw the towel in and stop caring for their appearance, symptom of depression, and
yes,
and sometimes even things like hoarding, you know, there's an attempt to hold on to old photographs of how I used to look, and old,
Yes.
or this is me, that's me, and I've got to surround myself with this so that I'm protecting myself, you know, from others, from losing that sense of who I am.
Right, and then I noticed that there's stories. I remember when I was young and I had 18 women.
Yes.
You know, in 1 week, and when I was young, I did okay.
Yeah, this is who I really am. Yes.
Right, this is who I, you know, I remember when I was in my 20s and how I looked. So the fantasy goes back to their old self. And there's a term for it. I don't know why it's not at the tip of my tongue. It's called the narcissistic collapse. That's what it is. So when the house of cards falls in, there's an implosion. Okay, so there may be a rage of an explosion, but then, as you say, they give up. So it's this narcissistic collapse. They get depressed and they can't get out of the hole in the soul. And there's nothing that's going to help. No amount of drugs, sex, and rock and roll is going to pull the person out of this one, because they can't really enjoy it the way they did, and their body doesn't function the way it did.
They almost kind of regress to being that infant.
Yes. But it's not a death with dignity. It's a death with bitterness. Okay. And it's not a death where the aging process is a badge of wisdom and experience. Right? It's incongruent.
Very sad.
It's a deep lack of acceptance of what is. So we will continue our chats, Christiana.
Of course we will.
I thank the audience for joining in. I really appreciate your listening and learning and mind mapping. And if you want to learn more about the mind map, please get a copy of my PDF book, where you can get the first video that I did years ago called the 9-panel mind map journey to healing. And that's available to you. You can purchase that. And soon will be available Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, which will be a deep dive into narcissism and how you can come out the other side through the work, the mind map work, and really understand how you've been encoded, and then decode all of the miscodings that didn't work out for you, and then recode you to health. And of course, recode you so that you don't attract narcissists and that you don't accept narcissists. So that's the goal of the video, is to get out of the psychological prison of narcissism. So I look forward to presenting everybody with that. And if you're interested in the future webinar, please call the clinic, and I'll make sure that you're on the list for when the webinar is ready to go with the video. And again, Christiana, thank you so much for being on the show. And you'll be back. And audience.
Dr. Judy, I think just as a last thing, I think it's got me thinking now. How can I age well? What does it mean actually to age well? How can I take responsibility for my own aging process?
I think you're doing a great job. You eat so clean, and you live in a beautiful environment. And I know you swim, and I think we do. Look, nobody wants to age prematurely. So let's take responsibility and eat the best and healthiest foods we can, and get exercise and get plenty of sleep. And if you want to make yourself beautiful, I'm all for it. I was in the beauty industry for years. I'm a Paul Mitchell graduate.
Yes, I can see.
And I love hair, and I love beauty, and love the concept of dating ready, actually, for people who just don't know how to do their hair, their makeup, or their clothing. There's nothing wrong with being beautiful but most of all, focus on feeling good, not just looking good.
This is what I mean. Yeah, I think it's, how do you want to, I think you want to be a woman of wisdom, don't you? Of having come through life and having an inner depth, I think, is the
It's
greatest.
very beautiful and very sexy for some people.
Yes, for some.
Wisdom and depth is sexy. It's the new sexy.
The new sexy. I love it.
I'm gonna call it the new sexy. All right. So thank you, Christiana, for this important discussion. And thank you again, audience. And good night, everybody.